In this tutorial, we are talking all about making DIY paper dahlia flowers. These are such a statement flower and they look like they are super complicated to make, but they are actually quite straightforward and very beginner friendly. So we're gonna go ahead and dive into the supply list for this project and get started because you are gonna be obsessed with making paper dahlias by the end of this tutorial. Let's go. So let's talk about the supplies you're gonna need for this project. You're gonna need something to cut your petals out with. So I am using a Cricut machine. You can use any of the current models of Cricut machines, the Makers, the Explore models, the Joy can even work. Any cutting machine that works with an SVG file will also work. If you are someone who plans to cut by hand, and we have had several crafters in our community do that, you're going to need a pair of scissors, and there are printable PDFs included. Now, as far as material, I'm using 65-pound weighted cardstock. That is my favorite. You can use 8.5 by 11, 12 by 12, but stay somewhere around the 65-pound weight. Medium weight cardstock is best. I am going to be using some distress inks and distress oxides here in this video. It's going to be adding some really fun color and shading to our dahlia petals here, but that is optional. So you would need some ink, and then you would need a blending brush or an ink dauber to get the ink onto your petals. I'm going to be using a high temp hot glue gun for our adhesives here. And since I am using a Cricut machine, I'll have my cutting mat here, and I will be pressing my cardstock paper onto my cutting mat using a brayer tool, which is not required, but often very helpful. To curl our petals of our dahlia, I'll be using a 1/4 inch wood dowel here. You can use, a 1/3 inch or even something like a spare glue stick can work, or a pencil. So it doesn't have to be exactly this, but you'll need something of this nature to curl your petals with. If you plan to stem your dahlia, which I will show you how to do at the end, you're going to need to have some 22, 24, or 18 gauge wire on hand. I've used all, they can all get the job done. 18 gauge wire is going to be thicker, whereas 24 gauge wire is going to be thinner like this. And in that case, you may also want to have a pair of wire cutters and some Needlenose pliers to shape our stem so that we can get it onto the base of our dahlia, and I'll walk you through all of that.
Before we start assembly, I want to make sure you know about our new season of Paper Flower Fest dropping soon. Join the free online event where you can find dozens of paper floral workshops. Visit the link below and in the video description to save your spot. All right, now back to the tutorial.
Let's go ahead and get started with this tutorial on our paper flower dahlia. So I'm going to go ahead and place my cardstock material onto my Cricut mat here. Make sure your blade is in good condition and you're selecting the correct material setting. So medium cardstock for me is the setting I'm using here, but if you're using something that's a little bit lighter or maybe slightly heavier, you may need to tweak the setting accordingly to your particular paper. So I'm going to get each of my colors cut out here. I've chosen to go with purples and reds for this dahlia color palette, but have fun with it because dahlias come in a wide range of colors and you can get really creative with your color palette. So go ahead and get everything cut out. All right, I'm going to unload my mat here. I'm going to flip my mat over and peel the mat away from the cardstock. And we'll get all of our dahlia petals taken off the mat here. All right, so we're gonna get started with adding our distress ink. Now, as far as petal count goes for one dahlia, I will say these dahlias are a little bit freeform. So if you find that you end up with one less petal in yours or wanna add a few more, that's perfectly fine. There's no absolute right or wrong way to do it. In general, what I use though, is I will use 6 of the larger dahlia petals that you'll see in the templates. And then I will use 4 of the slightly smaller. The slightly smaller will be towards the middle and we'll be starting with the larger ones, okay? So we're gonna add the distress ink. Now, when you're cutting your templates out, there was 12 cuts on mine and I cut 12 out at a time because that's what fit best on my Cricut mat and I didn't wanna waste the paper. So it was best for me to maximize my cuts, and then the fact that I was making more than one flower, they came in handy for the next flower and so on, and then you accumulated them. If you're using an 8.5 by 11, etc., you can adjust that. So I'm going to grab a scrap piece of paper here because we're going to be working with some distress ink and oxide, and that can be a little bit messy, though very well worth the results. So I'm going to start with one of these purple petals here. And we're going to start with the Distress ink in red, which is what I accomplished here on this one. And I'm going to be adding the red from the center out towards the edge of the petals to create this really pretty sort of ombre effect. And you'll see dahlias in nature often have sort of those colors that fade into each other. So this ink can really bring that to life. Okay, so you want to do circular motions, not too much heavy on the pressure. You want to do light pressure and let the color build. So circle, and then as the color builds, you can put a slight bit more pressure on it. May want to go back in and get a little more ink. All right, so there we go. You can see that there's this, let me get it a little bit better right there. You can see there's this really nice fading of this sort of red. It's also picking up some of that purple undertone, fading to the purple, original purple paper there. So this is a really beautiful effect, especially for dahlias when you're doing lots of layers. So not a requirement. I've made them many times without it. Here's one I made that did not have any. They're still beautiful, but this is a really fun thing to experiment with, especially when you do different papers and colors of ink and stuff like that. It can be a lot of fun. So if you're adding Distress ink, you would do that next at this step here. And people will often ask me, do you do both sides? And I say that always depends on two things. One, do you want to put that much detail into it? Two, how are you displaying your flower in the end? Is it something like if it's going into a bouquet where you might capture a lot of angles because of the way the bouquet is being moved around and handled, then maybe yes, you might want to do that. If you're maybe having this like glued down to a wreath and the wreath's on a wall, you may not see as many angles to the dahlia flowers, so you may not capture much of the color underside. If you want more detail and you want it to look more lifelike, then yes, absolutely add the color to both sides. It takes a few extra minutes, but the more minimal details, little touches here and there that you can add, the more it's going to come to life, just like a real flower in nature. So I'm going to repeat this for all 10, and you can decide whether or not you want to do both sides or just the one side. Now you can experiment with different inks. So this one here, this was an actual Distress ink. This is an oxide. Oxide more sits on top of the color of the paper, whereas the ink sort of lets the color of the paper come through. There's subtle differences in it, but if you wanted to experiment with the oxides instead, you could. So maybe I would get this one and I would mix it up. And we would add some pink, darker pink to this sort of purplish pink that we've got going here. And it's okay if it's subtle. It doesn't have to have this harsh contrast. You can see that's a lot more subtle, but it's still really going to capture some pretty details. All right, so I finished adding my Distress ink to all of my petals. Now we're going to shape the petals. So you can use something like a thin wood dowel. I've even used something like a spare glue stick over the years. Okay, I used to use spare glue sticks all the time. So all you need is something kind of thin and round, even a pencil can work, something like that. And you're going to come to each one of these petal points and curl the petal point around the dowel or whatever you might be using. You're going to repeat this for all 10 of your layers. These dahlias are great for beginners because it is not difficult to shape the petals and it is repetitive, which is a great way to learn. I've even had my kids help with these because they're simple enough that kids can get into them and do them and enjoy them as a craft or something that they make as a handmade gift for someone. So these are definitely a fun and beginner-friendly flower. So we're ready to go ahead and start layering these together. I'm going to start with the larger one, okay? And you want to come in with each one of these and you want to tuck each petal in front of the other so that they're kind of all flowing the same direction. So tucking, pulling up and tucking, 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 and tucking. So it kind of looks like that. Okay, and then you give a little twist and pinch at the bottom. And the reason we're doing this is because that's kind of training the paper and telling it that we kind of want it to stay upright. And then we can control how much we want it to open out as we build the bloom. So do that with each one of these. So now that we've got that, I want you to set 2 of your larger ones aside, and we're going to start with just 4 of them, okay? Open up one of the large ones and sort of flatten it out just a little bit like that. And you're going to open up another one, and you're going to progressively get tighter so that the bud is closing as we work towards the center. So that's why we bent them all up like that, sort of tucked and twisted. And now we can control how much we open it out as we layer. So I'm going to add some glue to one, and we're going to place it down on top of another. Aim to alternate your petal points. So see that this layer here, this petal point is falling between the layer beneath it and its 2 petal points, okay? So you want to follow that pattern back and forth all the way up as we go closer to the center of the flower. So adding our 3rd one in there. I'm going to open this one out a little bit, and notice that I'm opening each one up just a little bit less as I go. So there's what we have so far. And now we've done 4 of the larger. We're going to add the 4 smaller, and we'll come back to the last 2 larger one at the end, and I'll show you why. So we're going to take one of these, and it's already in pretty good as it is, so it's fairly open. Sometimes I'll keep it a little bit more snug, and then I'll let it open out once I've actually placed it into the middle there. All right, and as you get closer to the center, the alternating practice gets less exact. You'll notice that naturally, so don't get too hung up on that, because it is going to get, you know, a little bit more free form, and it's not going to be as precise because we're tightening the bud. All right, so there is that one. We have one more to put in here. So with this last one, you want to really tuck and twist at the bottom. I'm pinching and twisting. Those petals are all flowing the same direction. And I'm doing this because I really want that center to stay nice and closed. And so I'm encouraging that paper to hold itself in that shape. I'm going to add some glue there, and we'll place it right down into the center. Okay, now we're going to take these 2 remaining ones, and we're going to open them out, and I want you to kind of bend the petals backwards. We're not flattening the curved shape of the petal, but we're sort of just opening it out as if it's really blossomed open, okay? And we're going to flip the dahlia upside down and add these 2 to the bottom to create that sort of domed shape that a dahlia often gets. So we're going to add some glue here. Now you're back to paying attention to alternating those petal points. So okay, and then repeat with the very last one. And because we did save those last 2, you can see how this is fanning open at like an angle when we look at it from the top and the side. And that's what a dahlia looks like in nature. If we were to have started with those, it would have flattened itself out because we were putting all that pressure as we were building towards the center. So that's why I saved those last 2 for the end. And then you can kind of play with this a little bit if you want to fluff it out a little bit more. Have fun with it. Paper will relax a little bit over time, so keep that in mind. All right, there is our dahlia, super pretty. And if you look closely, you can see those hints of red and purples being picked up, very much like a dahlia in nature. So here's a close-up of our dahlia, and you can see those pretty reds, those red highlights that are being captured in there from the ink, and you still see that purple coming through. Same thing with this one here. This was a red one that I did. It's a little more subtle, but there is some like dusty purples in there that you can kind of see when you capture in the light, and it adds a lifelike nature to it. This one here, I did blues with purples, so that's actually fun. Kind of experimented with it a little bit there. So have fun with those distress inks. Now, if you wish to stem your dahlia flower, I'm going to show you how to do that here. So you're going to need to have some floral wire. You can use between 22 and 18 gauge wire. 18 gauge is going to be thicker. That's what I'm using here. I have used all varieties to get the job done, but that's what I'm featuring here is the 18 gauge wire. So what you want to do is you want to get your wire, and you're going to want to cut out one of these leaf bases here, okay? And if you don't want leaves for whatever reason, then you can substitute this leaf base for another layer of the dahlia petals. So cut an additional dahlia layer. If you want to add any distress ink to your leaves, you can do that as well. So this is a darker green paper that I chose here, but you can take a lighter green, in this case, this one's called Twisted Citron, and you can use your brush, let me find one here, I have it done, and just add a little bit of color to the edges if you want to create some blending variations there. So we have something like that where you can see the pretty different shades of green there, right? So that's optional, but it's really fun to add that. So I did that for most of my leaves here. And then as far as the stemming part goes, take your 18 gauge wire, grab your needle nose pliers. Actually, first, it can be good to trim the wire down. Unless you need a stem this long, I usually trim these in half. It's easier to work with when they're smaller. So trim it down if you need to. Take your needle nose pliers and come up to the top, and you're gonna grab it right at the top and then curl it down into a little circle, okay? All right, so we've got a little circle that we've curled there. And then we're going to take that and we're going to bend it at a 90-degree angle. And it can require a little bit more patience if you're doing the 18 gauge wire because it is thicker. So there's our little circle that we bent at a 90-degree angle, and that's what we're going to be placing our flower onto. Take one of these leaf pieces here, and then you're going to need a pair of scissors because we're going to punch a little hole through it. And I'm just using my Paper Bloom shaping mat here as a base because this is puncture resistant. So I can take the tip of my scissors and punch a little hole right into the center of this base piece. Now, I do recommend you always punch with your scissors because the reason with like the SVG files that I don't include the little circle cut out there is because in most cases your Cricut's going to rip it due to the tiny size. So it's better to just puncture with your scissors and go from there with that. It's much more accurate that way and it won't destroy your cut. If you want to add any shaping to your leaves, you could use something like a wood dowel, your Cricut scraper tool, and just add a little bit of curl and life to them. So that is an option for you, just like that. All right, and we're gonna stem this one here. So taking your wire here, you're gonna go ahead and put it through that little hole that we created and thread it up to the base. You might need to kind of flatten this out for the time being. And then we're going to load this up with some hot glue, just like that. Grab your dahlia and press it into the bottom of your dahlia flower. It can be helpful to sometimes gently place the flower upside down and kind of get it positioned like this to hold it in place until that hot glue grabs, okay? Hold it for a good 20 seconds at least before you attempt to let go so that it has a chance to really grab to the bottom of your flower. Now, if you're not doing a leaf and you don't want any greenery, you would just replace this with another layer of the dahlia petals. You'd slide that up the stem with the hole in it and you would follow suit exactly the same way, okay? All right, so there we go. My glue's grabbed. All right, there's how we stem our dahlia flowers. How pretty are these? So pretty. Very beginner friendly. And I'm gonna finish stemming the rest of these because I'm gonna put them into a bouquet in one of our future videos. I hope you enjoyed this dahlia lesson. Let me know what questions or comments you have below. I would love to hear them and help you out. And I hope to see you there. Thanks so much for watching, my friend, and bye for now.
Paper flowers are the perfect DIY project for weddings, showers, party decor, and unique gifts. For more easy flower tutorials just like this one, be sure to check out my free online Paper Flower Fest event that debuts every spring with a new season of tutorials, techniques, and templates. Visit the link below in the video description and in the corner of this video to join our next free virtual event online. I'll see you there.